what they have there. Well, it's very amazing here, and for this discussion, I'm joined with Herbert, and he's from Seattle, Uganda. We're going to be breaking down a part of these, trade, looking at trade, tariff structures and all that. Herbert, good morning. How are you? How are you today? Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Trust me, it's a pleasure. Being told it's been quite congested out there. Security is everywhere.
Everywhere, but of course we have to navigate and make our way to where we have to go.
Okay,
Yes.
That's beautiful. Now, the long-awaited days here. Today is day one, and I'm seeing quite the biggest discussions on agenda. Even the press puts it out clear: debt and investment top the NAM agenda. And what got my interest really was the aspect of reforming the contracts, the agreements of the Bretton Woods institutions, talking about World Bank, IMF, and the World Trade Organization. I want to understand, how do you think this will likely impact investment in our country, Uganda?
Thank you so much. But first, I would like to broadly shed light on NAM, because increasingly we've been talking about NAM now.
NAM.
And maybe the common person out there
yes.
would want to know what really NAM is.
Yes.
And NAM is the Non-Aligned Movement. It's an association of a number of countries that during the founding of NAM, these are countries that are not aligned all against US, or all against the powerful blocs.
Oh yeah, communism, capitalism.
Yeah, they're not, because there was the Cold War, there was the battle between United States of America and Soviet Union. So those, during the founding of NAM, these were really countries that came together, all are countries that came together that are not aligned with, all against those powerful blocs. But since the founding of NAM, the objectives have really broadened, because first it was in response to the Cold
War.
Yes. But over time there's appreciation of the different development challenges of countries that are members of NAM. And actually NAM has quite a number of countries that
30, 20?
It's over 120 countries.
Yeah.
Yes. And these are countries at different levels of development, although these are developing countries, but these are countries that are different levels of development. And Uganda is the least developed country.
So it's in the low-income bracket.
Yeah, it's in the low-income bracket.
Yeah.
But of course, we look at the benefits. Uganda can actually be able to accrue or acquire being the chair, because Uganda will assume chairmanship of NAM after the summit. After the summit. And so that presents a number of really benefits if we are clear-headed on what we want. Because if you're to look at hosting the conference itself is a remarkable opportunity.
Yeah.
Because NAM and group of 77 plus China, these are very, very important conferences. In fact, after CHOGM, these are the biggest.
These are the biggest.
Because a number of countries, nearly all African countries, are members of NAM.
Apart from South Sudan.
South Sudan is yet to be
a member.
Admitted, as a member. Nearly all members of African states and members of NAM. So that's really a great opportunity. And I think we can position ourselves accordingly. One, based on the chairmanship of NAM, because when you're chair of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, then you're able to advance your interests. Yes.
Very true.
And of course, if we're to look at also the opportunity of hosting the group of 77 plus China is also a very, very, very important
it's an event.
Yes, because the group of China, group of 77 plus China is the biggest negotiating group in the multilateral forums.
Okay.
It's the biggest negotiating group.
Plus China.
G77 plus China. Even when you look at United Nations, it's the biggest.
Okay.
And whatever interests G77 plus China advances, really the world listens. And actually hosting non-aligned movement and the G77 plus China will actually get us to be in the global spotlight.
Absolutely.
As a country,
yes.
Because now there's a focus on Uganda, which maybe wasn't previously.
Yeah.
So that's a profound opportunity. But also, we just don't want to host these important summits in the passing, but we also want to look at how we can position ourselves as a country.
The post-conference times.
Absolutely, not even just post-conference, because I've been listening and watching TV, and a number of government officials have been talking about how a number of agreements will be signed during the conferences, the two important conferences, non-aligned movement and group of 77 plus China. So it's for us who are critical on how the economy works and how government conducts, business in terms of the economic sense, looking at trade, tax, and also investment flows. We are keen on the agreements that Uganda will sign, but also beyond signing agreements, how will these agreements then now be operationalized? Because it's one thing signing an agreement, but it's also another mobilizing the constituency. Yes, making it work, because when you sign an agreement, each country is advancing its interests.
Exactly.
And so one country can actually outsmart another in terms of, selling its products. And then we can become a dumping ground for products from another country.
From other countries, yeah.
But then we would like also to position ourselves in terms of trade, because we've sustained a trade deficit. In fact, in 2022, our trade deficit was around of 4.77 billion US dollars. That was in 2022.
2022, okay.
And we've sustained a trade deficit with countries like China. So even the G77 plus China summit offers a great opportunity to have bilateral discussions with China, because we have a huge trade deficit with China. How then can we sit and discuss on how to address the trade deficit with individual countries, but also with the overall trade deficit? Because increasingly, China is taking center stage in trade and also investment in Uganda.
Exactly.
And a number of issues have been really raised around first, SINO, which is China-Africa relations, but also around China-Uganda relations, trade relations, trade and investment relations. But from the perspectives of trade, investment, and tax, we'll look at how then we can solve some of the challenges we've had, like the trade deficit with China. Countries like Kenya have taken it seriously. In fact, if you are to look at the trade deficit with China, it's not only Uganda that has a trade deficit with China, even the United States of America has a trade deficit with China. But also individual countries like in the East African community. Countries like Kenya have actually planned their trade accordingly. They have signed product-specific agreements with China, for example, to sell us avocados. So how then can Uganda also learn from others to be able to say, now being that NAM is hosted in Uganda and we will assume chairmanship of NAM, how then do we look at engaging individual countries, but also using the chairmanship to advance our interests? Because at the end of the day, when we take over our chairmanship of NAM from Azerbaijan, which has been a chair for some time, it will actually grant us the opportunity now to speak and say the final, the outcome document of NAM and the Kampala Declaration, because they are two different important documents. How then can we be able to influence the discussions to the end that we also advance our interests and speak to the realities, the development challenges that we are faced with, especially debt, climate crisis, because a number of issues have really been raised around the challenges of the century. And when you look at the major challenges, development challenges, we have debt, we have climate crisis. Of course, we also have geopolitical tensions and dynamics, which have continued, to manifest. And they have far-reaching implications. That's why sometimes people talk about Russia-Ukraine war, and they think we are not party to it in terms of how it can have ripple effects.
Ripple effects.
It really does, because we're in a global village, and there are trade relations that we have with a number of countries. Sometimes we rely on different countries for different products and supplies. So geopolitical tensions and shifts can actually cause supply chain distortions and disruptions that can actually, create imbalances, trade imbalances. So that's also another issue to look out to. But also when we talk about climate crisis, this is a challenge across the globe. Countries are looking at how to address, climate crisis.
Yeah.
Keeping temperatures low as 1.5 degrees Celsius, but also how do we then get the much needed finances to adapt? Yes. So all those discussions are at the center of NAM, Non-Aligned Movement Summit, but also G77 plus China Summit. Yes.
That's very interesting. And what you've mentioned, us being the chairman, because this is a period for about 3 years.
3 years.
Now, I'm trying to understand something when it comes to the investment side of it. We've been open to, we have a chance to get access to these markets. But from the investment perspective, looking at the composition of our economy, informal sector, SMEs take the largest portion. Are we in position really to sustain these bigger markets in terms of product delivery? Because I'm scared that you may look for this market and you want it so badly, but now it's open to you, but you can't satisfy it.
Thank you. I will speak to two issues: trade and investment, because we've talked about investment and trade. And we've had concerns as civil society, but also as Siatini, as an organization that is keen on trade, fiscal, and investment-related issues.
Okay.
We've looked at how Uganda has sustained a trade deficit overall broadly, but also how we've had trade deficits with countries like China. But also we've looked at market opportunities. And we've been keen on how government is steering trade, but also looking at how to boost our trade and at the same time go beyond market access to market entry. Because when you sign an agreement, market access is guaranteed. But market entry is about having your products on the shelves in the export destination, the country you're exporting to. So there are a number of barriers to market entry. But before I delve deep into the barriers to market entry, as Siatini, we've actually engaged government, a number of policymakers and technocrats, and actually engaged them on the need to focus more on first securing markets, and then mobilizing production. But also after securing markets, there is a lot of hard work that needs to be done in terms of enhancing the preparedness of our private sector. And if we talk about the private sector, we talk about micro, small, and medium enterprises, because they constitute over 90% of our private sector. They are the engine of our economy. And we are keen on looking at their challenges, the long-standing challenges that they have faced. For example, non-compliance to requisite standards, because it's important to note that every market has its own standards. Yes. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. Because when we look at even the East African community, there are a number of challenges that we've had. We've had non-tariff barriers. We've had issues of standards as part of the non-tariff barriers.
Actually, even I remember recently when NINOC was disrupted to mine in Kenya, the Kenya Petroleum Authority was saying for the last 3 years, you must have a turnover of $10 million as part of that's the law. That's how it operates. For you to operate in there, and it's putting just on top of that.
Yes, thank you for that rejoinder. But of course, to continue with the discussion in terms of how our economy is organized, having 90% of economic actors being micro, small, and medium enterprises. And these have had a number of challenges: high cost of doing business, non-compliance to requisite standards, among other challenges. So we look at how government's approach has been over the years. We've talked about how now there is the Africa-wide market, African Continental Free Trade Area. But we are yet to see MSMEs being fully mobilized and prepared. Because it's one thing. For example, in the face of in the face of NAM, non-aligned movement, it's one thing securing the market, but it's also another being able to fully seize the opportunities
Yes.
that are presented by that market. Because if you don't do it right, then you become a dumping ground, for products from another country.
Other countries.
But also, when we look at, we're to look at how we've managed our trade, I think we've not managed it well. The whole issue of diversifying products and diversifying markets is okay. But also we have to look at strategic products. How then do we mobilize, after securing markets, then we can work backwards and mobilize production. And like I earlier said, learning from how other countries have done it. Kenya, that has trade arrangements with China, but also South Korea. It's looking at how it can, over the years, export has avocados.
Okay.
But also addressing the issue of the trade deficit with China, because you can actually achieve different things when you maximize opportunities in trade. Because with trade you can reduce poverty.
Absolutely.
You can create jobs, enhance well-being of people, and revenue, and all those benefits accrue when you are clear-headed. That's why I actually emphasize the issue of being clear-headed, being clear on the products. What products are we fronting? What's our niche? What's our comparative advantage?
Exactly.
As we look at opportunities that NAM presents, how have we organized ourselves?
Okay.
Is the private sector fully mobilized to be able to seize opportunities? If that is yet to be done, how then are we going to do it? Because with the trade, there are no free lunches.
Absolutely.
There's nothing is a given. And negotiations, you have to really do the hard work of strategically positioning yourself, looking at what you can offer, the quantities, the quality, the standards along the chain, but also market entry. How is the private sector mobilized to be able to comply, but also to sustain production, not supplying as a one-off? Because you may get excited, but that can be short-lived. Because when you fail to satisfy the quantities that are needed, then you're not fully utilizing the market. So how then do we make sure that we have done it right? In terms of first securing the market, signing an agreement is okay. That's okay. We need to really diversify markets because we were dropped from the African Growth Opportunity Act list of beneficiaries. But having been dropped, what are the alternative markets? We have to also look at alternative markets. So it's a good thing that government is looking at signing agreements, securing other markets, but also let's do it right. Let's learn from the mistakes we've had in the past. And then do it right. What products are we fronting?
Okay.
After securing the markets, how then are we mobilizing production?
You know, there is something here because away from just being the chairman of NAM, we've been in NAM for so long, since we've been part of it for quite a while. Because majority of the critiques will come and tell you the composition of this entity itself. When you take a look at the GDPs of the different nations, the investment climate and all that perspective, there is a huge imbalance from that. So how sure are we that being chairman this time around, it's going to change things? But yet before, we've been known as the Pearl of Africa. Of course, we've been known to some degree. I understand the idea Uganda has been spread in terms of human rights, abuse, and so many more. But at least we've had always a positive side. Chogam was an eye-opener. At least people knew there is a country called Uganda. But away from that, the NAM has been operating for all these years. What are those tangible economic benefits that we can look at and say, oh, being part of this is a success? Because I would think that even the members that we share this organization, for example, India, because Indians are operating in Africa, in Uganda at the same time. But there is this whole perspective of some sort of economic racism in terms of when it comes to employing their people into these countries vis-a-vis what they give to the Ugandans out there. So how sure are we that being chairmanship, it should be demonstrated? That would be the first part of demonstrations. If they come in here let's see that, okay, we are one. We are looking for global, we are deepening cooperation for global affluence. It's not yet playing out for the past time, honestly. So that points out criticisms towards what our should we, we may be too expectant, and we are disappointed at the end of it.
Thank you so much. Maybe just to shed light on some of the gains that non-aligned movement group has been able to realize. One is the decolonization agenda, because countries gained independence. And there is power in collectivism. When you are together, then you can stand stronger in the face of waves,
Right, that's
global waves. And we've had a number of injustices, inequities in the multilateral environment. The developed countries are advancing their interests. There's a lot of unfairness. In fact, there are growing calls for reforms. First of the United Nations, of the World Trade Organization, of the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank and International Monetary Fund. So there have been increasingly growing calls for reforms. That the system, multilateral system, is not favoring developing countries. And in fact, when you look at even the, if we were to look at the score on achievement of sustainable development goals, we are falling far below the targets.
Yes.
As the least developed countries, but also developing countries. We are falling far below. And one of the reasons is the huge debt burden. Because one, we've increasingly talked about the sustainability.
That's exactly.
Because sustainability is not about being able to meet debt obligations, but we should also look at how paying debt servicing is depriving us of the much needed resources to be able to finance social services and achievement of sustainable development goals. So we should look at it in that framework. And actually, I will not overemphasize this because recently, the Auditor General's report that was released for the year ending June 2023, they're really worrying figures of how our debt burden is increasing.
All right, we are going to start from there when we come back from this break. It's exactly 27 minutes past 9. Let's take a quick break. And when we return, I'm still with Herbert from Siatini, Uganda, breaking down these matters, how Uganda is actually going to benefit from the investment perspective. Stick around.
Smart 24, driving business.
Jovia ng'oyolekera ku lugendo luno olw'obulamu nkuwa ekirabo eky'amaanyi agatazizibwa, amaanyi okulabibwa n'okuwulirwa mu mawanga ageewala ennyo, okutuuka buli wamu nga yadde togenzeeyo, ensi yonna ng'ekuli mu ngalo. Okutambula mu biseera n'okumanya buli kimu ekirina okumanyibwa. Jovia, kino kye kirabo kyange gy'oli.
Tewali kkubo ku ki ky'osobola okukola ku mukutu nnandameggwa ogwa MTN.
Cooking oil like no other makes your meal so sweet and scrumptious. The taste of Uganda, yeah, the taste of Uganda, the taste of Uganda.
What if you could boost your most loved entertainment?
We're up in the ante.
Upgrade your DSTV package and we'll boost you to the next higher package at no extra cost. If you're on Access and step up to Family, you get boosted to Compact.
You know what I mean.
If you're on Family, step up to Compact and we'll boost you to Compact Plus.
That's an absolute ripper.
And if you're on Compact, step up to Compact Plus. You'll get boosted to Premium.
It's gonna be lit.
Step up and we'll boost you even higher at no extra charge with DSTV.
Smart 24, driving business.
Heading into the last minutes of this discussion, of course, the non-alignment movement, day one, already on with the massive preparations already into the capital city of Kampala. But of course, away from still that, we need to understand that it's more than just hosting the conference for 5 days. But the big question is, after the conference, after 2 years, will there be something memorable to say that in 2024, delegates gathered in the city of Kampala to discuss issues? That's also quite a key discussion. And that will be witnessed in political diplomacy and the economy at the same time. Now, I'm still with Herbert from Seattle. We are breaking down the NAM here from the investment perspective. Before we went into the break, you hit something on the Auditor General's report, something which is quite very key. Why bring it here? Well, we are too excited about this. The delegates are here seeing the beautiful country, but little do they know that we are bleeding internally. So how do we leverage on the NAM to cover up this wound that is eating us all?
Thank you so much. Maybe what I can emphasize here is that members of non-aligned movement are cognizant of the challenges that actually they all face. And debt distress
definitely
being
is
one of them.
Yeah.
Climate crisis being another, but also other, political related challenges. But maybe what I would like to emphasize is the issue that when you look at the agenda, the issues that the members are looking forward to discussing, but also addressing, one of them being debt. There have been increasing calls for reforming the financial architecture, that it's not working for developing countries. In fact, the system is entrapping countries in debt.
Exactly.
And Uganda is one of the countries. And these reforms have been geared towards looking at how the system can be reformed to address issues of conditionalities, the interest rates, because you can wonder, Uganda was got debt relief under the highly indebted poor countries, HIPC, but we are now back to square one. Why are we not exiting debt? Why are we still in the vicious cycle of debt? Yes, part of it can be internal, whereby maybe we haven't managed our debt well,
corruption,
like the debt we are acquiring, corruption, among other issues. But also, it speaks to external factors, the conditionalities, even responsible lending. Because it's one thing you wanting to borrow, but it's another, the lender engaging you on your credit worthiness, but also how you're accumulating debt. Because in just 7 days, we accumulated a huge debt when there were fears, financial risks that IMF, World Bank might not give us
Money.
So we went on a borrowing spree and we acquired, a lot of money. But if you are to look at the utilization, the management of the borrowed money, then a lot is questionable.
A lot of it.
A lot of it. But also looking at the broader development challenges, I think the non-aligned movement, being that the outcome document has been built over time, the outcome document is not going to be developed here in Munyonyo. It's going to be interrogated. The issues that are there are going to be interrogated. The issues are going to be discussed, debated, because countries over the years have been submitting their reports,
Exactly.
making their contributions to these documents, to the outcome document. And so what will be done is an interrogation of the issues that are in, but also to look at the contemporary challenges. What challenges are we faced with now? How can we be able to address them collectively?
Yeah.
And so that positions Uganda, being the chair, to also advance its interests. But also, given that this is looking at South-to-South cooperation, looking at interests of developing countries, asserting their interests in the wake of the geopolitical tensions, and in the wake of the marginalization of developing countries in the multilateral systems, because it's not working for them. They are still trapped as primary commodity exporters. They are not going up the global value chain. And a number of issues explain that. So NAM is an opportunity to be able to speak to those challenges, but also, like I earlier said, for Uganda to be able to have now bilateral discussions with different countries on how to address issues of trade deficit, on how to look at, to discuss issues of technology transfer, because some of the members of NAM are economic powerhouses. If you are to look at China, India, South Africa, Indonesia,
Exactly.
These are powerhouses. You can't really ignore the fact that they have strong economies. How then can we achieve issues of technology transfer?
Okay.
How can we discuss that? We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, NAM had a key role. With the leadership of Azerbaijan, there is a coordinating bureau that was established to discuss equitable access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So there was that response, COVID-19 response task force and bureau that was established. There is the parliamentary network, NAM, Non-Aligned Movement Parliamentary Network. So a number of mechanisms have been put in place. But just to conclude, speaking to what we can be able, the opportunities we can be able to seize, then here, in the face of the global, the global challenges, as collectively, as NAM members, we can be able to assert our interests, speak with one voice, as developing countries, and also least developed countries. But also given that a number of, nearly all African countries are members of NAM, then we can be able to speak to our challenges. But also NAM is being audited by African Union. So whatever is happening at NAM level, African Union will be auditing that. I think later this year or next year, African Union will come up with a report on really how NAM is conducting business and whether it's still relevant now, given the changing times and the challenges.
Wow, interesting. And, we've seen member states being part of two blocs. You mentioned the powerful houses, India. India being part of the G20, now also part of the NAM. So there is a little bit of conflict, and yet these are the leaders, because if you take a look at from the history, we had India was part of the key founders of this. So if the key founder is in two-stage G20, is in the G20, is in the NAM at the same time, don't you think that has an impact on our management as a country when it comes to influencing such a nation?
Thank you so much. Maybe just to shed more light on this, NAM wields a lot of power. Collective power. And given that African countries are members, a number of them, nearly all of them, apart from South Sudan, they're all members of NAM. So it means we can be able to assert our interests. And the challenges Africa is faced with cannot be overemphasized. We all know that.
Exactly.
In terms of trade and also bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. And yet we have the least contribution to global gas emissions.
That's
true.
Yes. That's true.
So even when we are to talk about issues of energy transition, we then have to look at who has the technology. China has the technology. Because, in fact, China controls nearly 70% of the supply of solar panels.
Yeah, 70%. Global, yeah.
Yes. So we have to look at how then to engage, to leverage on that, different benefits that we get from the membership. But also, we are faced with nearly the same problems as developing countries. So we look at how to address those structural or long-standing challenges. But also, increasingly, we look at the geopolitical tension between powerful blocs. How then can we stand firm in the face of those geopolitical tensions? So NAM is very relevant. But also if you are to look at the group of 77 plus China, G77 plus China, nothing in terms of global diplomacy, no decision can be made without really consultation of G77 plus China. It commands a lot of power in the multilateral discussions. So we look at also how to leverage on that. Yes.
That's interesting. And now taking a look at the report here by the World Bank, which projects the GDP, as we speak right now, the GDP, the NAM, the global GDP, they contribute about 33%. And by 2027, there is a prediction of 37%. So that is still less than 50% compared to taking a look at the other powerhouses, Europe, I know that. So don't you think, now with 37%, Uganda also has a portion. Is that really enough?
Maybe I could speak to broadly beyond GDP, because most times we look at GDP economic growth and we think impressive GDP economic growth translates into a well-being of people. It doesn't. If you are to look at the figures, in 2021, we attracted 1.1 billion in terms of foreign direct investment, and has attracting foreign direct investment translated into shared benefits
for low income and
for the local people.
Low livelihoods.
We are yet to see that trickle down because one, the policy frameworks are not fit for purpose. That's why at Siatini we've been calling for the review of the Investment Code Act 2019.
Okay.
Why? Because it has gaps that need to be addressed. Issues of technology transfer are not there. Performance requirements. You see, when you attract an investor, you have to put in place performance requirements. For foreign direct investment to deliver on its promises, you have to have a policy that is fit for purpose. And at Siatini, we've actually been calling for the review of the Investment Code Act 2019. Why? Because the gaps therein are not allowing for the benefits, the greater benefits to be realized. Increasingly, our government's approach has been, calling on investors to come and invest. But beyond calling on investors, because when you call on investors, then you can attract them. But beyond giving tax incentives and land concessions, there are other factors that can actually attract investors, because the political environment, if it's good, then you don't have to cross, the line by giving, tax holidays that are depriving the country of the much needed revenue. But also, we've been calling on government to assess the efficacy of tax holidays, tax incentives.
Tax waivers, I think there's
we've been calling on government to assess their efficacy, and I'm glad that the Ministry of Finance has also realized that, and they are really, as part of the tax expenditure governance framework, they are assessing the efficacy of tax incentives.
Okay.
Because a number of them have not really yielded the expected benefits.
The beneficiaries.
But also, if you are to look at the host communities in terms of how investments are working for the people and the environment, and they are not, because there's been increasing environmental degradation, there's been increasing land grabbing at gunpoint in some districts of the country, but also the displacement of people, because increasingly we are giving, huge chunks of land to investors, but the benefits to communities are minimal.
Yeah.
If you are to look at, we are to assess Bidco, Oil Palm Uganda Limited, remember when we were facing challenges that were brought forth by the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yes.
The increases in commodity prices, cooking oil and others.
Wheat.
We were expecting that Bidco, Oil Palm Uganda Limited, would produce,
had the capacity
to produce cooking oil and also be able
satisfy the
market, but also reduce the prices.
Okay.
Because Bidco being given tax holidays and incentives means they were boosting domestic production.
Okay.
Because the president has quite often talked about import substitution.
Okay, yes.
And we're looking at how, the likes, Bidco and the likes, can be able to produce so that even in the wake of external tensions, we are able to say, we okay.
Domestically,
we can produce
sustain
domestically.
ourselves. Yeah.
But that is yet to be realized, Then it puts the whole issue of incentives and tax holidays in question. Why then do we continue doing that?
Yeah, okay.
But I'm glad that government is doing something about it. But also, if we were to look at the livelihoods of people, here we're talking about decent jobs.
Yeah.
Laborers, Ugandans, women, host communities are working under precarious conditions. They're working in low-wage jobs.
Absolutely. That's the aspect I was actually bringing on table regarding when it comes to economic racism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it can be partly because racial discrimination is one of the issues that NAM is looking at addressing.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yeah.
Because we can't talk about sovereignty, asserting our sovereignty, our interests and all that, without addressing issues of racial discrimination. And I'm glad that when you look at the objectives of NAM, that's part of the issues that they're addressing. But also at Siatini, we last year and the past years, we had a discussion series about dubbed whose economy.
Okay.
We were looking at the participation of citizens in the economy. What's their place? And if you are to look at young people, of course we know their plight. Unemployment rates are high.
That's so high.
And anything in terms of a job that avails itself, they go for it. And we are looking at how a number of them have,
flown out of the country
and
become modern
day slaves. Greener, modern day slaves to look for greener pastures in United Arab Emirates. And as a country, as government, I think government has to now devise strategies on how we can make investments work for the people and the environment. Because increasingly, the pollution, because chemicals from some of the industries spill over into water sources. But we look at also land degradation. And among other challenges, the violation of economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights broadly by investors. And at Siatini, we are not against investors, all investments, all foreign direct investments. But we are looking at how we can achieve a win-win situation.
Okay.
How we can be able to attract investors, get the much needed revenue, but also be able to realize the economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights of the people and host communities.
And maybe on top of that, you mentioned something about citizens' participation of the country. And I would feel like the key aspect, it comes to skilling, skilling and education. Those are, because when you're skilled and you're educated, you can't be more than a slave. You know who you are. And taking a look at what happened in the Auditor General's report, you clearly see that even the National Council of Higher Education is put into the light of courses that are not ratified. So that in a way has an implication to our students that move out there to seek jobs. Nigeria was complaining about us. recently, I think a week ago. So looking at all these perspectives, because if you, okay, now like if the debt refinancing is 21 trillion, I'm just assuming this, and we have a budget of 52 trillion, you know, and tax collections 29 trillion. Literally, we have about 7 trillion left. So that calls for more borrowing. Now, I want to understand how are we going to provide, first of all, healthcare, education, and skilling initiatives? Because I would feel this is part of our responsibility as a country to benefit from now. I don't think now member states are going to do this for us.
Thank you so much. I think we need to look at this holistically, and I'm glad you've mentioned quite a number of challenges that we have to address. But also we have to look at external relations, because one, we have to look at external relations, external challenges, internal challenges, long-standing challenges, because we need to actually have a number of lenses.
Okay.
And also to look at how different categories of people are affected. Because when you look at the challenges that we're faced with, for example, one, climate crisis. Host communities are affected.
Exactly.
Because drought affects host communities. Farmers. Then we need to make sure that agro-industrialization gets more money, agro-industrialization program gets more money to be able to deliver on a number of things that are needed. For example, extension services, value addition, among other issues that are embedded within the framework of agro-industrialization program. But also, there is realization that budgetary allocation has been actually falling far below. If we were to look at agriculture sector, we have been falling far below 10%, the recommended.
Okay.
But if you are to also look at how much has been allocated to agro-industrialization, a number of it is coming from external sources, not internal sources. If you are to critically look at the budgetary allocation, where we expect to get the money. But also, we are falling below. It has been reducing, save for the previous year when there was a marginal increase, but we've been really falling far below since 2014.
Okay.
So there have been quite a number of challenges. And if we are to look at making the economy work, beyond looking at the skills, we need to look at other issues within the economy.
Okay.
How are we organizing our trade? How are we mobilizing the private sector, enhancing its preparedness? How are we enhancing our competitiveness? Negotiating power. If you are to look at the African Growth Opportunity Act, AGOA, Uganda being dropped from the list of beneficiaries. Before, when we were on the list, we were experiencing or benefiting from the duty-free, export arrangement.
Exactly.
But now, our exports to the US, it doesn't mean that being dropped from the AGOA list of beneficiaries, we won't trade. We will export. Maybe in the future, we'll even be readmitted. We will be exporting. So, countries that are on the list of beneficiaries, exporting duty-free, how will we be able to compete with them when our exports now will attract taxes around 3.4%? So that's a bit of a challenge. Then it means one way of doing it is diversifying markets, getting alternative markets. And NAM presents that opportunity.
Those opportunities.
For us to get secure alternative markets, but also discuss deeper issues beyond market access, beyond signing agreements. How then do we able to discuss, look at market entry? How are we enhancing the preparedness of our private sector to be able to utilize such markets? How are we working on standards?
In other words, we've gotten these markets, but now we need to look at the quality we supply to these markets.
Absolutely. And each market has different standards. Yes.
Beautiful insight right there. I've been with Herbert from Asiati in Uganda, of course, breaking down issues to do with the NAM, but he mentioned something very important. It's way beyond agreements, market entry, but the standards, what we do. And that's where we've actually been having huge challenges. Standards. because I think even when we were our goods were put on hold by Kenya, Sudan. Of course, I understand there could be issues of protectionism in that country, but 70% has to do with the quality.
I think when we talk about standards, then we are talking about Uganda National Bureau of Standards.
Exactly.
It has a decree of limited budgetary allocation to allow it to have a strong presence. For example, first at all border points.
Okay.
And also, when you look at Uganda Export Promotion Board, it is also incapacitated to deliver on its mandate of disseminating market information to micro, small, and medium enterprises, but also being able to mobilize private sector, micro, small, and medium enterprises. But we cannot talk about trade if we're not talking about Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Cooperatives.
Cooperatives, yes.
It has also really had a number of challenges. One, limited budgetary allocation, but also in terms of the power institutions that have been created. We've actually, I think, reduced its mandate.
Okay.
And I think it's now upon government to strengthen the Ministry of Trade to steer the country's trade in the wake of these markets that are increasingly, coming up. How are we positioning ourselves? We recently signed an MOU with Russia.
Yes.
There was last year. There was excitement about the Serbia market.
Yes.
It's a good thing, but beyond the MOUs, how are we now mobilizing farmers? How are we bargaining better so that we solve some of the challenges we've had? Because over the years, we've exported raw coffee, beans. How are we now securing better markets? How are we mobilizing farmers? How are we addressing the requirements now? Because we export nearly 60% of our coffee to the European Union, but there are a number of directives that have been introduced. There is the European Union Deforestation Directive, among others, and these have far-reaching implications. There is what they call the CS3D, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive from the European Union, and it has a number of implications on the coffee sector, among other sectors.
Thank you, Herbert. Thanks for being part of the show. It's 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Till tomorrow, it's day one summit. And of course, definitely, I want to wish you a great day. But make sure that as you're heading back home, you be careful because there's going to be quite lots of diversions in terms of traffic. Till tomorrow.